Okay, hello everyone. Welcome to the next talk, and thank you for having me here at BuildStuff Lithuania. I'm really excited to be speaking here today. That's my first time here. So I've had the chance, if I can make sure my slides are okay. There we go. I've had the chance to play around with this new React framework, Redwood SDK, and I would love to share what I've learned from that. And for sure, a lot of people here are not familiar with it because it's very new and not very marketed, I would say. So Redwood SDK itself is very simple, but it does not limit us from using any of the cool new React features. So we're going to learn that as well along the way here. Now, first, let me introduce myself. My name is Aurora. I'm from Norway, currently living and working in Oslo. I'm a front-end developer, Microsoft MVP in web tech, and React educator. And my primary role is a consultant at Crayon Consulting. However, I'm also the React certification lead at Certificates Dev, which is a certification platform. In my primary role, I'm actively building with the Next.js app router using modern React features like React Server components and other things. And as someone coming from that, I was intrigued to learn about Redwood SDK because it builds on a lot of the same React features, but it does it in a very different way. Whereas Next.js is quite opinionated and has a lot of rules, which comes with pros and cons. I love to build with Next.js, but I know that not everybody feels the same way. And that's okay. So if abstractions and rules are not really your thing, Redwood SDK might be the alternative you're looking for. It is a new React framework for building server-side web apps, aiming to bring back the joy of building personal software. If you've ever heard of Redwood.js, this is actually not the same thing. So Redwood.js is an older open source project initiated by Tom Preston-Werner, co-founder of GitHub and creator of Jekyll, and many more significant open source initiatives. And as quoted here by another co-founder, Redwood.js never quite reached escape velocity to make Redwood self-sustaining. So they adopted React Server components early, but that turned out to be a long and tough grind, and the co-founders were simultaneously pulled elsewhere. So what happened is that Redwood split into two projects, Redwood GraphQL, which is Redwood.js, the new name for that, as the previous project, and then Redwood SDK as a new project, each with a clearly defined path. Peter Pistorius, a core team member, took over the project with an evolved vision for Redwood's future that would be rooted in the original ethos the team had always cared about. These are some of the people behind Redwood SDK. They started working on the framework in November 2024, working toward the beta release, which happened at React Conf in 2025, where it was announced. So they basically created a very simple implementation of React Server components and then continued on top of that. Right, so then let's see what features make Redwood SDK special. It begins as a Vite plugin that unlocks SSR, React Server components, server functions, and real-time features. And you probably already know Redwood SDK because it's just Vite, TypeScript, React, and web standards. So there's actually not a whole lot to learn. Redwood SDK is built specifically for Cloudflare without any adapters, so what runs locally is also what runs in production. And in development, you can use Miniflare to emulate Cloudflare workers, giving you a clean path from idea to deploy. So wait, a framework built for Cloudflare? Yes. Redwood SDK uses Cloudflare for its full-stack React framework because it offers a platform for high-performance and edge-first applications with low latency and precise request response control. So by doing this, by building on Cloudflare, Redwood SDK can minimize abstraction, enabling developers to build applications with a unified code base that can leverage services like D1, queues, and workers without managing a separate infrastructure. And this approach is part of the larger philosophy that they have of building personal software that is owned, shareable, and built with a focus on developer joy and direct control over the application flow. And in Redwood SDK, every route is just a function, so there's no special syntax or compiler magic. A route takes a request and returns a response, or even a page. Here, we have this define app export, which is the entry point for the Cloudflare worker. It contains an index route for the home page returning a React component, and a route for the users here, and another route that just returns a response. So it probably looks very familiar. Redwood SDK is built on web standards, so we have this request response, which follow the native API. So you can stream responses, upgrade protocols, or debug in DevTools without any wrappers or black boxes. Here we have a route receiving a request, getting the form data from it, and the file attached to it, and then streaming it into R2 storage. You can also co-locate your logic with related UI, keeping, for example, redirect responses and JSX responses together, scoped to a single router. For example, executing redirect logic before returning the actual page component. Furthermore, there are this thing called interrupters that I hadn't encountered in any other frameworks, which is pretty cool. And they can shape the request flow before they hit your route. So you can intercept requests, for example, to check authentication, redirect, halt the response on a per route basis with access to the environment and context. So here we are extracting this reusable is-authenticated function that can be reused for any route we want to check auth for. So that makes Redwood SDK composable. One of the reasons that Redwood SDK is composable. There's also middleware, so that allows you to run logic before and after your routes. It's also part of the request response flow, and you can inject headers, set up the app context, or stream from the edge. And this middleware attaches the user object to the app context before every request, making it available for any page in our app. Now, Redwood SDK gives you total control on the document, so there's no hidden magic. So, for example, you can choose exactly what goes over the wire, like doing a Node.js document, where clearly there is no JavaScript attached, no client-side hydration, and then you can export separate documents for different routes in your app. Now, Redwood SDK uses React Server components, so everything is server-first by default, similar to Next.js App Router if you've used that. So your components would run on the server and then stream HTML straight to the browser. And then when you need interactivity, you can mark components with use client. So that's the same mental model you might be familiar with already. So after all of this, there's not that much more to learn about Redwood. However, since we are using React Server components and it's built so heavily with React features, we should probably refresh our knowledge here too. So if you're not familiar, React Server components are the components that only run on the server or in the build and never on the client. And they have slowly increased in adoption over the years after they were released in React 19. And again, they were also adopted by Redwood.js before they decided to switch or create the two paths. And this is different from server-side rendering because they are never hydrated. So that means that the result of your app would be partially hydrated. And it means that you can't use your state, effects, or browser APIs or hooks inside server components, which, if you're not used to it, feels very restricting, right? But they are extremely powerful. They can do a lot of things. They can be asynchronous and fetch their own data right inside the component itself. And since they're only run on the server, they can access backend resources directly in proximity to the resource, for example, a database. And lastly, since their JavaScript is never shipped to the client, they can reduce the bundle size and let us build very performant apps by default. Here's an example of a simple server component, a node. It can be async, it can query the database through an ORM like Prisma and have the data available and the component fully rendered before it's even sent to the client. And this also allows the component to be fully composable and reusable anywhere in the app, which aligns with React's architecture vision of components that can handle their own logic and UI. And furthermore, server components allow us to fetch and render on the server and then stream in the fully rendered components to the client as they complete, and utilizing suspense to display fallbacks. This is beneficial because we are sharing the compute load between the server and the client. We can display static content that would otherwise be blocked behind the server response, and even hydrate other components on the client while streaming. So this is pretty cool. Redwood SDK picked server components as their foundation, just like Next.js did. However, Redwood SDK is kind of the opposite of Next.js, as it heavily relies on web standards instead of creating any new abstractions, right? While still being true to this new architectural vision for React. With server components, we also have client components, which are the regular React components that run on the client, can use client-side features like useState, useEffect, hooks, and browser APIs. And they're marked with this use client directive, acting as sort of a portal back to the regular React world. So when you have both client and server components, you might need to compose them together. Here, we're creating an expandable client component that contains state, and we can wrap this around server content. And this pattern is also often called the donut pattern. It allows you to build basically whatever you want. Typically, you could have a tree that looks like this, with client logic located in the leaf components or wrappers. So if you want to optimize performance, you should be extracting your client logic this way, but it's not really a requirement. You can still build fully client-side apps if you like, after the initial server components. Now, Redwood also, again, implements a lot of new React features and integrated with React server functions. So this means that you can simplify a lot of your development flow. Server functions are marked with use server, and they are used to define server code that can be executed from the client without writing endpoints, and also give you type safety through RPC. So just like in Next.js, the server functions are implemented by the framework, but they are, in fact, a React 19 feature. They kind of take us back from the client to the server, which is very often useful when performing mutations. Finally, Redwood SDK integrates with client-side React 19 features, allowing us to bring the interactivity to our apps using the latest and greatest from React. So instead of building their own hooks and client-side features like React Router has, they just rely on everything that is already in React 19. So again, I have been working with Next.js for a very long time, and being able to work the way that I'm used to with React while using a new and less opinionated framework just felt very simple and natural. There was like no learning curve for me there. So let me just go through also what I'm going to be doing later, because we're going to have a demo, and I'm going to be using some of this stuff. So we have this new type of deferred event handling called actions. Now you might be familiar with React 19's use, or React 18's use transition, which allow us to perform non-blocking state updates. Now we have this new terminology called actions, which just means a function called in a transition. And this can simplify many common interactions like form submissions. They can throw errors, handle optimistic updates, and avoid unwanted flickering pending states. And in React 19, the use transition hook can take in asynchronous functions, which allows us to create asynchronous actions and provides a pending state for that action. Very useful when performing a mutation and then updating state based on it. We also have this new form component extended from the native HTML form. We can use this to now bind to this action property with functions and not just routes. So it's still familiar for if you've used the native form element with API routes, but it's now attachable to functions, like for example, server functions. And it wraps the provided function in a transition. That's why it's called an action. So it's actually a form action. So in other words here, React is adopting patterns from the web platform. So if we're using this, we don't need to use prevent default, right? We have a few more hooks. We have this use from status, which can give us information about the most recent form submission from a parent form. And with this, we don't need to do prop drilling down to, for example, a button just to show a pending state. And we have this use action state, which can let us simplify common use cases for actions by allowing us to create state based on the return value of an action. This is useful in connection with form submissions. You can attach the returned form action to a form and trigger use action state when the form is submitted. And this can also work without JavaScript and provides progress enhancement. And we have another common UI pattern that a React 19 hook can solve, which is optimistic updates. So we can display an optimistic state while an async request is running. So for this, we have this hook, use optimistic, which, yeah, we can use it in connection with asynchronous actions while they're being completed. And then finally, we have this new API that is kind of confusing because it does a bunch of different things, but basically it can read promises or React context. And in our case, we're going to use it for reading promises from the server in a client component. So it allows us to pass a promise from the server and then resolve it on the client. And then we can also suspend that and provide a fallback. One more thing that will be useful in Redwood SDK is this React 19. Basically, it's just an improvement. So if you might have been familiar with working with metadata in React, that could be a bit troublesome because the components that had the content of the metadata might have been deeply nested far from the actual head. So that's why we had libraries like React Helmet. And then now we can just use the new metadata APIs from React 19, which will automatically hoist or move these meta tags up to the head tag for you. So if you've used Next.js, you might know that there's like this generate metadata API. Well, we don't need that in Redwood because Redwood just uses whatever React 19 provides already. So with all of that, I think we are ready to create interactive apps, which will be performant by default with Redwood. So I already know web standards, and combined with the latest React, I think we have everything we need. So let's jump over to a demo. Yeah. So I'm here in my worker TSX file. This is the entry point for our Cloudflare worker. And in Redwood, every route is just a function. So here I have a couple of routes. I have a set of API routes. I have my index route returning this response, just a response object here. Yeah, I'm also showcasing what it looks like to have params here. So there's also this middleware. So whenever a request hits our server here, it will pass through all of the middleware. So I have this middleware for common headers, and then some session middleware, which is handling our session with Cloudflare durable objects. So I can, for example, go ahead and add some get user middleware here. And this now will also be, my request will pass through this, and I would, in this case, check if there is a user ID on the session, and then set this user on the app context. So we have this app context here. And it's this mutable object that we can store any information on that will be provided to our components and routes and even server functions. So this is going to be useful later. Let's also go ahead and render a document here. Let's render a Node.js document. Let's do a render function here, and then do this Node.js document. And I think I forgot something. And let's move our response in here, like that. And I forgot something, did I? This is the root path, right? Oh yeah, Node.js document. Let's actually return JSX instead so we can see it. Let's do, this is just a response. Let's do return JSX here instead. So yeah, we can also return JSX like that, just fine. And this Node.js document is, as the name suggests, not containing any client-side hydration here. It's just very plain. We can control this. For some reason, maybe we don't need JavaScript for this specific route. We can do that. Then we can also do layouts in Redwood. We have this layout function. Let's try this. Let's do a app layout here and provide this list for our routes. And that should also work just fine. So yeah, a few utilities here from Redwood, but not that many. And instead of this index, let's or this JSX, let's do a home page. And ta-da, it's a to-do app. Great way to learn a new framework. Yeah, so in this home page, remember we are using server components as the default here. So this is the server component, and I'm actually using this app context, the one that we set up in our middleware, so I have access to my username here. I can view this here, and I can render this logout button conditionally if I'm logged in. So very simple here with app context. And we can also add in some data from the server. Let's do some to-dos stats. So I'm going to use suspense, and we can use actually here server components. So let's see if this is going to load. So I have this fallback here with this to-do stat skeleton. So this is what you'll commonly see if you're working with server components. So to provide the best initial loading experience, we just suspend whatever is going to be slow, in this case the to-dos, and then provide a fallback to give us maximum performance here, just streaming this in. To-do stats server component, it can use async await here to just get the data from our Prisma, through Prisma with our D1 database. Yeah, that's how server components work in Redwood, just like you might be familiar with. Let's also actually check out, I have some more routes here. I have this API routes over here. So here I set up just some very simple API routes, extracted it into a different function. Again, composability, we can move things wherever we like. I have my different CRUD operations here. And maybe I want to use this in a simple page. For example, a simple to-dos page, like this. I should be able to navigate here now. So here, remember, we're still in this Node.js document, right? But we're just using the native form actions in this case, just talking to that API that we set up. Method post, I can interact with this. You see it's doing the default browser spinner. It's just a default form submit. So if you don't need, for some reason, you want to build a Node.js application, that's entirely possible in Redwood. Yeah, just getting the to-dos. And I'm using this, maybe it's not working actually. Okay, yeah, never mind. That part's not working. Okay, what else? Well, this is like user data, right? So maybe I want to protect this. Well, we can use interrupters for that. So if I want to protect this and run some sort of logic before my route, I can do just a list here instead of a function, and do, for example, an is authenticated interrupter. And here it's just a function that you can export, reuse all over your app, which will just redirect me to the login if I'm not logged in, if I try to go to this page. So yeah, interrupters work like that. So yeah, this will just intercept the route and then redirect. What else might we want here? Well, we're using React. We probably need interactivity at some point. For now, we're just using this Node.js document. So let's also get a regular document here. We're going to add a bunch of routes here. And this regular document, I have this import client TSX, the script tag. Client TSX is actually calling this init client from Redwood SDK. So this is initializing the client-side hydration. So this will just hydrate the RC payload that we get for server components here. Now, looking back at what's here, I have this set of user routes that I prefixed with user. So just extracting that to a separate section of my app. Maybe I want to co-locate that with the rest of my logic here. I have some interrupters here, login, log out, and I also have this login page. Let me just log out first so you can see what's here. And guess what? I am using use client because I want interactivity for this one. So I'm already in this Node.js doc. I moved from my Node.js document into this JavaScript hydrated document so I can use client and get client-side features. For example, I can use action state for this login. I get this form action that I can attach to my form. I'm also using server functions here. So I have this await login with use server, so I don't have to create API routes for this. I can just use server functions, which is actually handling my sessions that I set up in the middleware. So everything here just works as you might be familiar with React's features. And for the actual sign-in button, let's see if this is over here. Button, use firm status. I mean, I spent a lot of time learning these features, so I'm really happy when I get to use them in a different framework. Let's try to sign in here. So I'm going to use Aurora, okay. And it's spinning, nice, beautiful. Okay, what else? Well, we have a bunch of routes, but maybe you noticed, I still have this default browser spinner, right? So it's doing this up here in the fab icon. I don't have any client-side hydration right now. This is just a full page reload. Yeah, MPA. So maybe we want client-side hydration too, or client-side navigation, sorry. We can set that up also in the client TSX. We would just init client navigation. And that should be enough for it to work. Let's try. Yeah, there we go. No spinner, smooth navigations just using React here, not getting the whole document again. So what's happening now is actually Redwood intercepts every internal link and then pushes the URL to the route, to the, what do you say? Up here, forgot the name of that. And then fetches the RC payload and then hydrates on the client. So that's what's happening with this in the client navigation. All right, that's pretty good and working. You might be noticing that I was clicking this fancy to-dos route here. So I tried to build the fanciest thing I possibly could with React 19. So I have this actually initial to-dos fetching data on the server here. Again, we're streaming in using suspense. So when I load the page, I have this fallback to-do skeleton. And notice I'm not awaiting this actually. That's why I'm not blocking the initial load. So we're getting this good performance even though I'm still fetching here. And that means that I can go ahead and read this with use, which is, this is a client component by the way, because I'm gonna use some interactive features. I want client-side hydration. And then I can read this promise with use and then suspend with this fallback. So I have this great performance and UX still fetching data here on the server. Again, I'm going to use actions, use action state. I have this to-dos reducer, like a server-side reducer, using server functions. So yeah, we're talking through our ORM here and adding new to-dos to the database. Lots of cool things. It's the same as the simple to-dos, but just with modern features. I'm also using use optimistic. So yeah, I can get optimistic updates. And I'm using actions all over here so that I can set this and get this synchronized behavior where I don't have to worry about race conditions and pending states being out of order or causing this flickering UI. Let's try if this is going to work. So I have this instant interaction, and then it's going to sync to the server. So that's the setup here. Pretty nice. And I also have this, let's do a new one here. Optimistic updates, right? Really nice. So I'm pretty happy with this. I can use all of my fancy React features in a predictable way here. Yeah, nothing's stopping me from doing that. Have you guys ever viewed transitions, this new component? Yes. Well, I will be showing you a bit of that as well because I have a lot of time in this talk, so let's do that too. This is a new feature. It's a React component that is a wrapper around the View Transition Browser API. So it's like a componentized version and a declarative way to use View Transitions in React. And it will basically trigger when an element is updated in a transition or with suspense or with a deferred update. So that means that React can, when a transition finishes, automatically animate the result of that into the new UI. So let's use this in our application. I want to actually animate something here. I have this suspense and this to-dos, right? So when I load this, maybe I want to animate the suspense because it's going to look nicer. So we can do that with a view transition. So we can actually add a view transition around this skeleton, like this. Yeah. And I'm going to import the view transition here because it's still in Canary, and I had to do this for Redwood. That's okay. Yeah. View transitions actually have a couple of different triggers that we can add custom CSS to. So we can do something for the exit, which means that whenever this view transition component is removed from the DOM, it will trigger this custom animation. We can do the same for enter. And we can also trigger if something inside this view transition updates. And then we also have this thing called name, which is for connecting two different elements, which I'm not going to show you today, but it's basically what you'll see when you have this cool view transition where one element goes into the next, right, across pages. We're going to just use the exit here. And let's do a slide down. And then for the actual content, let's do another one. Let's do a view transition, slide up. And let's also exit. Slide down. And then one thing we can do is add a default, which just means we're going to turn off anything else than these triggers so we don't impact the rest of the UI. Default. Oh, you already saw that. Oh, it was working earlier. Let me try again. There, see? It's nice, right? So we have this very intentional animation for our fallback here, animating into the content. Let's also do one more. So actually inside the to-dos here, I have this sort here, which is just sorting. And this is using actions. So that means we can trigger view transitions with that. I have this to-do list over here. And I have my to-do items. So if this is any change here is triggered by a transition, it will animate whatever is inside. So we can use a view transition here. And let me just move the key to this part. And then we can go ahead and wrap that here. Oh, it's nice, right? I'm so glad it worked. Yeah, so because this click is actually using a transition, it's somewhere here. To do, where is this sort button? It's using a transition, right? So that means that we can trigger this view transition because it's using a transition, which is how view transitions are triggered. It's a little bit confusing, but yeah, that's how it's happening right here. So we can also do one more. Let's do like an animation between pages. Maybe we want some sort of slide here. Let's go back to the home page over here. And let's see if I can add I'm not sure. Yeah, this one. Let's try. There we go. So you can do whatever you want. You can tell your designer, hey, it's okay, I can animate things now. I'm not going to be scared anymore of your animations. There we go. So basically with view transitions, I can declaratively define my animations and React will do all the work. And I'm really bad at animations, so I'm happy that I can do this now. And one thing I forgot to say, these custom here are just inside my global, my index CSS styles. I have this view transition here. So I just copy paste this from the docs. I don't know what this does. Well, kind of, but not really. So that's all I had to do. All right, let's do one more cool feature in Redwood. Let's get back to the worker TSX here. I have this real-time page over here. So let's check out what this is. So here, I'm using the Cloudflare durable objects in Redwood to store some theme state and also some emojis. So I have this theme state. I have this background, header, this reactions, which is actually showcasing my reactions that I would be clicking, and then the actual emoji picker. This is my setup. I have an emoji picker. It's a client component. It's using, again, some nice React features to make this interactive. And it's also using server functions. So when I click in my emoji grid, let's see if I can find this, I'm using server functions to update whatever is in my durable object here. So that's my setup. Let's try it out. So I would be clicking this, and then it would appear. Pretty simple. Now, what if I had two of this? Well, let's go to the real-time demo. You'd expect this to just happen for one client, right? As expected, it's just appearing on one screen. What if I told you that in Redwood, it actually has built-in support for real-time features with WebSockets? So I'm going to just really quickly set that up. So to do that, we would go into the client, TSX, and just init the real-time client here. I have a snippet for this one. So basically what I'm going to do is just get the response from the client navigation and then init the real-time client with this response and use a key for whatever clients are going to share the same response, which is just going to be my path name here. So I'm switching from a fetch-based RC payload to a stream-based RC payload. And utilizing Cloudflare for this. Then we can go ahead and wire up this real-time route over here. Let's do it actually here. It's going to be this is all we need, like that. Just setting up this real-time durable object. And let's see if we can get this to work. Maybe I have to refresh this. See? So now it's streaming this to both of my clients using WebSockets, which is pretty nice. So we have this persistent bidirectional connection now across all of my clients on the same path name. So they share the same RC payload. So we can do this because we are using server components, which can be shared. And this will scale infinitely because we're just using Cloudflare here. To release this to production, I would do pm release, which is like a one-command deploy sort of thing. It will upload the website to Cloudflare, create the database assets and whatever storage assets, whatever we have defined in our, what is this file? Wrangler? In here? Yeah. And I already pushed this, so let's see if we can get this to work. Maybe we can check if it's going to work with your phones. Hopefully it will work. I'm going to see if I can initialize this. Just going to refresh the page. This has been here for a while. Go. Are you clicking something? There we go. OK. It should be working now. Keep on clicking. Oh, no. This was working when I tested it this morning. Is it working? No, I'm not supposed to be refreshing. It's supposed to be just the going. Let's see. OK, there's a problem. They appear when you click an emoji? Well, it's not supposed to be doing that. It's supposed to be appearing. This is not the UX I'm looking for. Well, kind of. It's been working better before. Anyway, you saw it here. I think that's okay. Let's get back to the slides before we have more problems. Okay. Yeah. So basically, we were building here on the web standard request response. We had complete control over the document. We utilized Cloudflare durable objects and databases, and then we could stream server components. And we had the simple to-dos page using just SSR without any JavaScript. But we could also add in hydration, use all of the new React features in a predictable way, just like React has kind of explained that they want it to be used, like server functions and the new hooks for interactivity. And then I added client-side navigation, which can allow us to use view transitions. I forgot to say that, but in Redwood, every navigation using their client-side navigation is a transition. That's why my view transition was triggering. And then we initialized this real-time client, which didn't work as well as I expected, but it did work still, streaming RSCs over WebSockets. And that was all in the same app. So Redwood SDK sort of takes React and TypeScript and Cloudflare and then binds it together as something that feels cohesive, but still based on web standards. So let's see what else is here. Redwood SDK is currently in beta still, and they're just cleaning up, ready for the V1 release, working very hard to get it stable, and also adding a few more features. And there's a lot more exciting things happening, so keep an eye out for this. And you can support the team by starring the repo, and yeah, try it out. And if you like it, tell your friends and coworkers. And this is the repo for the application that I showed you if you want to have a look at that. You can also access it either by the link or the QR code, which also contains my other social media links. And I know that was a lot of, a few more still taking pictures. I know there was a lot of React features that I went through, so if you want like a cheat sheet, that I made this because I was trying to learn it myself. This like summarizing all of the React 19 features, so this might be helpful if that was a lot of new things to learn. Yeah, that's also the QR code for that. And then finally, if you're interested in verifying and improving your React skills, or you want to learn React best practices or even advanced topics, the React certification at Certificates Dev is now available. And this will test your knowledge with questions and coding challenges and includes training content to guide you while you're preparing. So I led the content creation for this entire certification. And I mean, it's my certification. So of course, I'm biased, but I think this is a really great way to increase your knowledge and get validated credentials. And it also includes a lot of the new features that I was using today. So thank you very much for having me here. Thank you.